Let's be frank, Lynn. Coming off of a 41-17 loss to the Michigan Wolverines, James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions need a big bounce-back win against Minnesota. They got just that and more in a 45-17 victory against the Golden Gophers in the Whiteout on Saturday night. Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Justin Ciavolella, joined alongside my friends with Flo, Josh Bartosik and Jude Wozniak. While Minnesota is used to blizzard conditions, the Golden Gophers dug themselves a hole they could not escape in the Whiteout. Josh, we will start with you. How was Penn State able to bounce back in this one?
Well, we'll start on the defensive side of the ball. That was Manny Diaz did a phenomenal job having a bounce-back game. We saw how badly they got exposed against Michigan. Blake Corum and that entire running back room was able to just absolutely dominate. They never crowded the box. They were running a lot of zone defense. And Penn State knew what they needed to do. They needed to stop Mo Ibrahim, and that's exactly what they were able to do. They did the best they could. Yes, he had a rushing touchdown and still had over 100 yards, but he only had about 3.4 yards per carry, which is exactly what you really want, because with Tanner Morgan out for that game, you knew they were not going to be able to throw the ball very well. That's exactly what happened. And now going to the offensive side, despite the first start, I know that you're going to mention the first few bad drives. Despite that, Sean Clifford had a phenomenal game. He had almost 300 yards passing, and he had 4 touchdowns, along with the fact that Mitchell Tinsley and Parker Washington had phenomenal games. It's really nice to see that Mike Yurcich finally learned how to use his offense correctly. It's almost like using a deep ball threat like Tinsley on a deep ball play works instead of giving him 5-yard out routes. But back to Sean Clifford. He's really having an underrated season, and for everyone to continue to boo him and demand that Drew gets in, I know everyone wants to see the new talent, the fun freshman, the 5-star. But Sean's doing a phenomenal job, and he did it again against Minnesota, and realistically, people just need to stop complaining when he's doing what he needs to do to win football games for Penn State.
Yeah, the Michigan game was a hiccup for Sean, but he's played well all year. But I agree with all your points on the defensive end. And coming out of this game, it looked really ugly in that first quarter to start. The first 3 drives, they did not look good. 2 3-and-outs and then a pick on the second play of that drive. But the defense really bailed them out. For Minnesota's first 3 drives, in 2 of those drives ended in negative yards. And then the other drive, they had a good drive going, but the defense locked up. Minnesota was able to get a field goal. And after Penn State's 4th offensive drive, they were 4 for 7 on third down conversions. And if you had the 1 for 1 on 4th down, that's 5 for 8. 62%. They were doing a phenomenal job on being able to convert the third downs. And that's what I'm really big on, converting third downs, because that's what keeps drives going. I think the offense was clicking well. The freshman duo and Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen over 150 yards on less than 30 carries. That's great for them. Last year we saw them average 3.2 to 3.4 yards per carry a game, and this year they're at 5. There's no complaining on the offensive end in terms of running the ball. They may be shaky to start games, and we'll talk about it later. They can't have that against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think you guys both bring up great points. It was a total team effort on Saturday night, and it was about time that the Nittany Lions got that total team effort. But with that, we'll switch over to this week coming up. That win against Minnesota bumped the Nittany Lions up to number 16 in the AP poll from 13, giving way to a top 15 matchup with the Ohio State University. The Buckeyes are ranked number 2 in the country, and outside of their 11-point victory over Notre Dame, they have looked unstoppable, beating all of their opponents except those Fighting Irish by 29 or more points, including a 54-10 victory over Iowa this past weekend. Jude, I'll turn to you first on this one. What's to watch for in this game?
Well, I think the biggest thing to look at is how good these Ohio State Buckeyes receivers are. So let's look at the cornerback room. Joey Porter, Kalen King. The Penn State cornerback room has been really good, especially in the red zone. So we're going to have to see them lock down and try and prevent what Ohio State does and score touchdowns. We saw Iowa do it a little bit early on, and Ohio State had 4 field goals in that first half, and they had a defensive touchdown. Without that defensive touchdown, that game was close. Joey Porter has allowed 10 incompletions on the year, has 8 pass deflections, and has only allowed 11 completions on the year. He's been phenomenal for this Penn State defense, and honestly, last year he was horrible. He could not cover Garrett Wilson, could not cover Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it's going to be a challenge for him covering these receivers because it seems like every year they find them. We'll talk about the running game. Last year against Ohio State, they only averaged 1.1 yards per carry. It was horrible. And Penn State's leading rusher, John Lovett. Who remembers him out there transferring from Oregon, coming back here? And it was really bad out there in Ohio State. I was luckily enough able to go out there and watch, and it was not good. And they still had a chance to win. If it wasn't for a fumble, that turned into points, Penn State had a chance to come out of the shoe with a victory. You look at the offensive end, the running game's a lot better. And they're going to come in. Last year, they are only 153 yards away from beating the mark that they set last year in rushing yards. They're only 7 games into the season. They played 13 games last year, and you're about to beat your rushing total from last year in 8 games. I think that's what they need to harp on. Sean Clifford needs to throw less, but make the crucial throws. And I don't think that they're going to turn the ball over as much. They're going to pound the rock this week.
Yeah, I'll stick on the defensive side to start for this one. Manny Diaz needs an exact replica or a near perfect replica from this past week. And he needs to be absolutely perfect on the defensive side because of how lethal Ohio State's offense is. Specifically, Abdul Carter and Curtis Jacobs need to be on the field for nearly every single play at the same time. I don't know why they finally decided to do that against Minnesota. It should have been done the entire season because those two were phenomenal. They both had phenomenal games, were really solid at stopping the run against Minnesota, and that could be crucial in making it so that only Ohio State has to throw the ball because they have a very solid running game as well. Obviously not as well known as their passing game, but if you can take that away from them, you kind of know what to expect from them. On the offensive side, this is one of the biggest games of Mike Yurcich's early career as an offensive coordinator for Penn State. If he shows more of what he showed at spreading the ball around and getting everyone involved against Minnesota, Penn State has a much better chance to win the game. If not, if we see more of the same like we saw against Michigan and early on in the season, maybe even against Purdue and last year, he could be out the door before the season is even over. He has to get everyone involved. Keep feeding the rock to Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. When they're hot, Penn State has a much better chance to win football games. And you really just have to distribute the wealth on offense because the longer that offense is out on the field and the less that C.J. Stroud is out on the field, the better it will be for Penn State to have a chance to win this football game.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And based off that performance against Minnesota last week, you probably don't want to change too much going into this game against Ohio State, but you never know what'll happen. And for Penn State, they're going to have to do the things that both of you just mentioned, or else it could be a spooky Halloween weekend in Happy Valley. But with all of that being said, I want you guys to give me your score predictions and one hot take for Saturday's matchup, which is set to begin at noon. Josh, we'll start with you for this one.
Look, I've been kind of alluding to it a lot, and it's going to rely a lot on Sean Clifford. I've mentioned how everyone keeps turning on the guy. He's realistically done nothing wrong. He has almost 1,500 yards passing this season, has 13 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. That's really solid for a starting quarterback that a lot of people thought was just not good enough, and he's realistically helped Penn State win games. He had a game-winning drive against Purdue. He was really solid against Minnesota. Was honestly the best offensive player on the field at Michigan, and no one really talks about that. So my hot take for this game is that Sean Clifford's going to have a near replica of what he did against Minnesota. Over 300 yards passing, over 3 touchdowns. However, do I think it's enough for Penn State to win this football game because of how lethal Ohio State's offense is? Unfortunately not for the Nittany Lions. I think that Ohio State's going to come out 45 points. Give me Penn State 32.
For me, my hot take is that Penn State's coming away with a victory. They are going into Beaver Stadium, the big noon kickoff, and they are coming away with a victory. C.J. Stroud has the best receivers in the country, the best O-line in the country, a top 5 running back room in the country, and he is the Heisman favorite, no doubt. Doesn't matter. It does not matter to me. Sean Clifford's going to show that he is one of the best quarterbacks in Penn State history. He will be clutch in the situation at Beaver Stadium. C.J. Stroud has already choked in the big noon kickoff. We saw what happened last year at Michigan. He is going to choke again here at Beaver Stadium. I will tell you that. This crowd is going to be roaring. And you thought that the 5 false starts for Minnesota was a lot? Try 7 for Ohio State this week. Penn State is going to make a statement, and it's going to be like the 2016 run where they're going to need a little bit of help to tie up the division where they can have a chance at the Big Ten championship game. But I think it's very possible. I think that they're riding off momentum. I think that Sean Clifford stays up. I think Olu Fashanu is going to play great. I think Landon Tangwell, they're all going to keep him up. Landon Tangwell has been hurt, but he's coming back, and the offensive line will look phenomenal, let me tell you that. And my prediction for the scores, 35-31, Penn State Nittany Lions.
Well, that's bold, Jude, but I think I might have to go with you. I think the Nittany Lions could pull off this victory in Beaver Stadium. Here's the thing, though. I think if one offense can't get going, the other one can't. And you just talked about how you don't think Ohio State, maybe C.J. Stroud won't do as good. Well, I'm going to go with if he can't do good, neither is Sean Clifford and Penn State How about this? A defensive matchup in Happy Valley starting at noon. The energy always a little bit lower. Well, the energy is going to be lower because there's less points. How about 14-13 Penn State wins? But with that, that'll do it for this week's edition of Penn State football on Penn State Sports Night. For Josh Bartosik and Jude Wozniak, I'm Justin Ciavolella. We'll see on Saturday if the Buckeyes stop here.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.